During what seemed like a routine property damage case, entitled Real Estate Agent Karen Thompson does something that no defendant has ever dared to do in Judge Judy's 25-year career. She laughs directly in the judge's face and demands she reconsider who's really in charge here. But what Judge Judy discovers in the next 48 seconds will not only destroy Karen's arrogant smirk forever, it exposes a dark secret that Karen has been hiding for years. The shocking truth: this wasn't just about a damaged fence. Karen had been running a calculated insurance fraud scheme across multiple neighborhoods, targeting elderly homeowners like 78-year-old Mrs. Chen, and she thought she was untouchable. The explosive confrontation that follows leaves hardened court staff gasping, the audience in stunned silence, and Karen Thompson, this confident, entitled woman who walked into court like she owned the place, collapsing into uncontrollable sobs as her entire world crumbles in real time. Why did Karen believe she could manipulate Judge Judy? What made her think she was above the law, and how did one 78-year-old grandmother with a security camera expose a fraud ring that had been operating for 3 years? The shocking 48-second exchange is caught on camera, and what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice while showing you exactly what happens when entitlement meets accountability. It was supposed to be a simple case: Karen Thompson versus Mrs. Lu Chen, $2,800 in damages after Karen allegedly backed her luxury SUV into Mrs. Chen's fence and prize-winning garden. But Karen wasn't here to pay. She was here to collect. Standing confidently in her designer suit, perfectly styled blonde hair, and that unmistakable "I'd like to speak to the manager" energy, Karen had just spent 10 minutes explaining to Judge Judy why this wasn't her fault. According to Karen, Mrs. Chen's fence was illegally positioned, her garden was an eyesore that blocked visibility, and actually, Mrs. Chen should be paying her $200 for the scratches on her BMW. Mrs. Chen sat quietly, clutching her worn leather purse, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she listened to Karen's lies. This 78-year-old woman, who had immigrated from Taiwan 40 years ago and worked double shifts as a seamstress to buy her small home, was being accused of fraud by the woman who destroyed her late husband's memorial garden. Judge Judy had heard thousands of cases, dealt with every type of person imaginable, but something about Karen's story wasn't adding up. The way she avoided eye contact when describing the accident, the slight smirk when she mentioned Mrs. Chen's age, the calculated pauses before each excuse. "Mrs. Thompson," Judge Judy said, adjusting her glasses and leaning forward, "I've reviewed your statement, and I'm ruling in favor of Mrs. Chen. You will pay $2,800 for damages, plus court costs." The courtroom was silent, Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with grateful tears. The audience nodded in approval. But then Karen Thompson did something that would be replayed millions of times across social media. She laughed, not a nervous chuckle, not an embarrassed giggle. A full condescending laugh that echoed through the courtroom like a slap in the face. "Your Honor," Karen said, her voice dripping with arrogance, "I think you need to reconsider who's really at fault here. Maybe it's time someone explained to you how the real world works." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but everyone could feel the storm building. And in exactly 48 seconds, Karen Thompson would learn that sometimes the real world fights back. If you can't wait to see how this unfolds, smash that like button right now and let me know in the comments. Have you ever seen someone this entitled in court before? And don't forget to subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. Let me take you back to how this all started, because what you're about to learn will make Karen's downfall even more satisfying. 3 weeks earlier, it was supposed to be a routine Tuesday morning in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Scottsdale, Arizona. Mrs. Lu Chen, a 78-year-old widow, was tending to her late husband's memorial garden, the same garden she had lovingly maintained for 5 years since his passing from cancer. But Karen Thompson, a 42-year-old real estate agent driving her white BMW X5, was more focused on her phone than the road. She was texting her assistant about a $1 million listing when she slammed into reverse and plowed straight through Mrs. Chen's fence, destroying not just the wooden barrier, but crushing the rare orchids her husband had planted before he died. Mrs. Chen rushed outside in her slippers, heart pounding, only to find Karen standing over the destruction, not apologizing but taking photos of her own car's bumper. "Look what your stupid fence did to my car," were the first words out of Karen's mouth. Fast forward to today's courtroom. Karen had just spent 20 minutes presenting what she called her undeniable evidence to Judge Judy. Her designer briefcase was full of carefully crafted lies, fake witness statements, doctored photos, and a bogus traffic report she'd somehow obtained. The courtroom was eerily quiet as Judge Judy meticulously reviewed each document, her experienced eyes scanning for inconsistencies. Mrs. Chen sat in the plaintiff's chair, her worn hands gripping her late husband's walking cane, the same one she now needed because the stress from Karen's harassment had worsened her arthritis. Then Karen's phone buzzed, loudly. Instead of silencing it like any respectful person would, Karen actually looked at the message and smirked. It was from her husband, Brad. "Did you win yet? We need that money for the Cabo vacation. The kids are asking when we leave." The vacation they were planning to take with the money they were trying to steal from a grieving widow. Mrs. Chen wouldn't get justice if Karen's lies succeeded. This elderly woman, who had worked 16-hour days as a seamstress for 40 years, who had saved every penny to buy her small piece of the American dream, was about to lose $2,800 she couldn't afford because a wealthy real estate agent wanted a free vacation. Karen suddenly stood up, her eyes blazing with entitlement, and interrupted Judge Judy mid-review. "Your Honor, I really need this resolved quickly. I have a showing at 3 p.m. for a $1.2 million property. This is taking longer than expected." Judge Judy slowly raised her head, her steel gray eyes locking onto Karen with a look that could have melted titanium. "Excuse me?" Karen, completely oblivious to the danger she was in, doubled down. "I mean, this is just a minor fender bender. This is bigger than some old lady's garden. I have important business to handle." The audience gasped. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. But Judge Judy had seen something in those documents that Karen didn't know she'd seen. Security footage from Mrs. Chen's neighbor showing Karen's BMW deliberately backing up and ramming the fence. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. Photos that proved Karen was texting while driving, including the exact message she was sending. About to teach this old bat a lesson about property boundaries. And most damning of all, a paper trail showing Karen's previous complaints about Mrs. Chen to the HOA, trying to force the elderly woman to remove her garden months before the accident. This wasn't road rage. This wasn't carelessness. This was calculated destruction designed to look like an accident. Judge Judy had also discovered something else in her preliminary investigation, something that would blow this case wide open and expose Karen's true nature. Mrs. Chen wasn't Karen's first victim. What Judge Judy was about to reveal would not only vindicate Mrs. Chen, but uncover a pattern of behavior so shocking, so deliberately cruel, that even Karen's own family would turn against her. The evidence was damning. The truth was undeniable. And Karen Thompson was about to learn that Judge Judy doesn't just deliver justice. She delivers consequences. What happened next would be talked about in legal circles for years to come. Because instead of hearing the respectful "Yes, Your Honor" that Judge Judy expected after her sharp rebuke, something absolutely chilling happened. Karen Thompson didn't apologize. She didn't back down. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms, tilted her head with that signature entitled smirk, and said in a voice cold enough to freeze hellfire, "I don't think you understand the situation here, Judge." The entire courtroom went dead silent. Court reporters stopped typing. The camera operators unconsciously leaned forward. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause in disbelief. No one, and I mean no one, had ever spoken to Judge Judy like this in her 25-year career. Defendants had argued, pleaded, even cried, but never had anyone stood in her courtroom and essentially told her she was wrong about being the judge. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. Not a muscle twitched, but her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than a shout. "Mrs. Thompson, I am the judge in this courtroom." Karen's face tightened, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the flash of pure arrogance that crossed her features. What came out of her mouth next would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Well, maybe you need to reconsider who's really at fault here. Maybe you need to understand that some people in this room actually contribute to society." From the gallery, audible gasps echoed through the room like thunder. An elderly man in the front row whispered, "Dear God," under his breath. A young mother covered her child's ears as if Karen's words were somehow toxic. Mrs. Chen, sitting just feet away from this verbal assault, clutched her worn leather purse against her chest as tears began forming in her weathered eyes. This gentle woman, who had never hurt anyone in her 78 years, was watching a stranger try to destroy her dignity on national television. The bailiff, a 20-year veteran named Officer Martinez who had seen every type of courtroom drama imaginable, subtly moved closer to the defendant's table. Something in his gut told him this was about to get much worse. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting started. As Judge Judy began to speak again, Karen actually held up her hand like she was stopping traffic and interrupted. "Before you say anything else, let me explain something to you about property values in my neighborhood." She then pulled out her phone, in the middle of Judge Judy's courtroom and started scrolling through what appeared to be real estate listings. See, when people like her Karen gestured dismissively toward Mrs. Chen without even looking at her. Let their properties become eyesores with all these weird foreign plants and decorations. It affects everyone's home values. I'm actually doing the neighborhood a favor. The audacity was breathtaking. Karen was simultaneously being racist, ageist, and classist, while showing complete contempt for the court. She was checking her phone, rolling her eyes every time Mrs. Chen tried to speak, and making exaggerated sighs like she was being forced to endure something beneath her dignity. Your Honor, Karen continued, her voice getting shriller with each word. I don't think you understand who I am. I'm a licensed real estate professional. I've closed over $50 million in sales this year. I drive a BMW. I live in an $800,000 house. This case is honestly beneath my time. She gestured toward Mrs. Chen again, this time with obvious disgust. She probably doesn't even speak proper English. How am I supposed to communicate with someone who doesn't understand basic American property law? The racism hung in the air like poison gas. Mrs. Chen, who spoke 4 languages fluently and had been a U.S. citizen for 35 years, finally broke down completely, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Why is she so mean?" Judge Judy's eyes narrowed to laser points. Her hands, usually folded calmly on the bench, slowly clenched into fists. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every injustice she'd ever witnessed. Something is very wrong here, Mrs. Thompson. Something is very, very wrong, and I'm about to find out exactly what it is. Karen, completely oblivious to the storm she had just unleashed, actually laughed and said, "Good luck with that, Judge, but I've got lawyers who cost more per hour than she makes in a month." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Officer Martinez's hand instinctively moved toward his radio. Mrs. Chen's quiet sobs were the only sound that cut through the chaos. And Judge Judy? Judge Judy slowly reached under her bench and pulled out a thick manila folder that Karen hadn't seen before. "Mrs. Thompson," Judge Judy said, her voice now carrying an edge that could cut diamond, "I think it's time we discussed your other activities." Karen's smug expression faltered for just a moment. What other activities? Judge Judy opened the folder, and what was inside would wipe that arrogant smirk off Karen's face forever. Because what Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy hadn't just been reviewing this case. She'd been investigating, and what she'd found about Karen Thompson's pattern of targeting elderly homeowners was about to turn this simple property damage case into something much, much bigger, something that would destroy Karen's life in ways she never saw coming. Judge Judy opened that manila folder with the precision of a surgeon, and what spilled out would shatter Karen's world completely. Minutes earlier, while Karen had been busy destroying her own credibility, Judge Judy's clerk had been handed additional evidence that would change everything. Security footage from not just one neighbor, but 5 different houses showing Karen's BMW deliberately targeting elderly homeowners' properties over the past 18 months. There was Mrs. Rodriguez, age 81, whose mailbox Karen had accidentally destroyed while texting. Mr. Kim, 73, whose prize roses were crushed when Karen claimed her brakes failed. And Mrs. Washington, 85, whose wheelchair ramp was damaged in what Karen called a parking mishap. But it wasn't just the footage. Hidden inside the folder was a police report Karen had tried to bury, one that revealed she'd been investigated twice before for suspicious insurance claims. Her social media posts mocking old people who can't handle modern life and complaining about neighborhood eyesores that need to be dealt with, most damning of all, were text messages between Karen and her husband, discussing their mounting credit card debt and how these old fools never fight back anyway. When planning their insurance fraud schemes behind the defendant's table, Karen's lawyer was frantically texting his law firm, trying to find an exit strategy for what was about to become a criminal case. In Seattle, Mrs. Chen's daughter was boarding an emergency flight with a box full of additional evidence. And across 3 neighborhoods, previous victims of Karen's calculated cruelty were finally coming forward. The bailiff leaned over and whispered to Judge Judy, "Your Honor, there's more evidence coming in. A lot more." Judge Judy's eyes never left Karen's face as she absorbed this information. The hunter had become the hunted. Judge Judy stood up slowly, documents trembling in her hands, her voice cutting through the courtroom silence like a blade. "Mrs. Thompson, in 25 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such calculated, systematic deception." Karen's face drained of all color as Judge Judy began reading from the hidden police report. Her confident smirk evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of someone watching their carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. "You didn't just damage Mrs. Chen's property," Judge Judy continued, her voice rising with righteous fury. "You've been running targeted insurance scams across 3 neighborhoods, specifically choosing elderly victims who you thought wouldn't fight back." The courtroom screens lit up with crystal clear, 4K security footage showing Karen's BMW deliberately ramming Mrs. Chen's fence not once but 3 separate times. The audio captured Karen laughing as she destroyed the memorial garden, saying, "That'll teach the old bat to mess with property values." Mrs. Chen gasped, covering her mouth as the full scope of Karen's cruelty emerged. This wasn't just destruction. It was pure malice. At home, Karen's husband Brad frantically called their lawyer as he watched his wife's crimes exposed on national television. Their children, watching from school, saw their mother revealed as a fraud who targeted grandparents for money. "Your Honor, I can explain," Karen started desperately. But Judge Judy cut her off with the force of a tsunami. "The only thing you'll be explaining is to the fraud investigators I'm calling the moment this case ends. Mrs. Thompson, you are not just liable for $2,800 in damages, you're facing federal charges for insurance fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy." The evidence was overwhelming: 7 separate insurance claims, financial records showing Karen's $89,000 credit card debt, witness testimonies about her threatening elderly homeowners, and her own recorded confessions thinking no one was listening. Karen collapsed into her chair as the weight of 25 years of justice came crashing down on her privileged world. Can you believe what just happened? If this is giving you justice chills, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because Karen's about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. The moment Judge Judy finished reading the final piece of evidence, something extraordinary happened in that courtroom. The woman who had walked in like she owned the world, who had mocked an elderly widow and disrespected a federal judge, completely and utterly crumbled. Karen's confident smirk didn't just fade, it shattered like glass. Her perfectly styled facade cracked, revealing trembling lips and wide, terrified eyes that suddenly understood the magnitude of what she had done. The reality of federal charges, criminal investigations, and national humiliation hit her like a freight train. "Your Honor, please, I didn't mean—" Karen's voice cracked mid-sentence, the words barely escaping her throat as her entire body began to shake. And then the tears came, not the calculated tears of someone trying to manipulate sympathy, but the raw, desperate sobs of a person watching their entire life collapse in real time. Mascara streamed down her cheeks as she gasped between words. "My children. Oh God, my children are going to see this. My job. My reputation. What will people think? What will my neighbors say?" The courtroom, which had been filled with righteous anger just moments before, fell into stunned silence as they witnessed this complete psychological breakdown. Even some audience members who had been furious with Karen began to feel uncomfortable watching another human being disintegrate so completely. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice firm but surprisingly not cruel. "Mrs. Thompson, you should have thought about your children before you chose deception over decency. You should have considered your reputation before you decided to target elderly people for financial gain." Karen collapsed into her chair like a marionette with cut strings, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. The designer suit that had made her feel so superior was now wrinkled and stained with tears. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her face as she rocked back and forth whispering, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over. What happened next shocked everyone in the courtroom, including Judge Judy herself. Mrs. Chen, this 78-year-old woman who had been victimized, humiliated, and subjected to racist attacks just minutes earlier, looked at Karen not with satisfaction or anger but with genuine pity. Her weathered face showed compassion for the woman who had tried to destroy her life. The bailiff, Officer Martinez, quietly walked over and handed Karen a box of tissues. Her lawyer sat beside her in stunned silence, frantically scribbling notes while shaking his head in disbelief at what his client had done to herself. Judge Judy stood to deliver her final ruling, her voice carrying the weight of justice served. "Mrs. Thompson, I hereby order you to pay Mrs. Chen $2,800 in damages, plus court costs totaling $200. Additionally, I am immediately referring this case to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Fraud Division for criminal prosecution." The gavel came down with finality that echoed through the silent courtroom. But the consequences had already begun before Karen even left the building. Her real estate firm, watching the case live, had already suspended her license pending investigation. The Arizona Real Estate Commission was opening an ethics inquiry. Her professional reputation, built over 15 years, was destroyed in 25 minutes. At home, her husband Brad was packing suitcases for himself and their 2 teenage children. He had called a divorce attorney during the commercial break, unable to face the shame of being married to someone who targeted elderly immigrants for money. Her phone, still buzzing incessantly, showed hundreds of missed calls from reporters, angry neighbors, and former clients demanding explanations. Her social media accounts, once filled with glamorous real estate photos and family vacation pictures, were being flooded with comments from strangers who had watched her cruel performance. By sunset that day, Karen Thompson would be facing federal charges, divorce papers, financial ruin, and the complete destruction of everything she had worked to build. The woman who had walked into court believing she was untouchable had learned the hardest lesson of her life. In America, justice doesn't care how much money you make or what car you drive. Mrs. Chen, meanwhile, was surrounded by supporters from her neighborhood, people who had watched the case and wanted to show their respect for her dignity and grace under pressure. 3 months after that devastating courtroom confrontation, Karen Thompson's life had undergone a transformation that no one could have predicted. The federal fraud charges resulted in 18 months of supervised probation and 500 hours of community service. Her 15-year real estate career was over. Her marriage had ended when Brad filed for divorce. Unable to face the shame of being associated with someone who had targeted elderly immigrants for financial gain. But something unexpected happened during those dark months. Mrs. Chen, showing grace that few could comprehend, used her $2,800 settlement to create something beautiful, an expanded memorial garden for her late husband that became a neighborhood gathering place where elderly residents could find peace and community. The case had become a viral sensation, watched by over 50 million people worldwide, teaching an entire generation about the consequences of entitlement and the power of dignity in the face of cruelty. Judge Judy later reflected, "Entitlement is a choice, but so is accountability. Karen chose poorly, but she also chose to change. Because 6 weeks after her sentencing, Karen did something that shocked everyone who knew her. She wrote a public apology letter admitting 2 years of selfish behavior and announcing she would dedicate her community, service hours specifically, to helping elderly residents with property, maintenance, and then Mrs. Chen did something that revealed the true strength of her character. She forgave Karen completely and even hired her to help maintain the memorial garden. Today, Karen visits Mrs. Chen every Saturday morning, not as the arrogant real estate agent who once mocked elderly immigrants, but as a humbled woman learning what service actually means. The two women, separated by culture and language but united by an understanding of redemption, tend to flourish together in quiet companionship. Mrs. Chen's daughter flew in from Seattle last month and said something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "My mother's faith in American justice has been completely restored." The security footage from that courtroom confrontation is now shown in law schools across the country as a case study in how arrogance and prejudice can destroy lives, while dignity and grace can rebuild them. Judge Judy's final reflection captures the true meaning of what happened that day. Sometimes the courtroom isn't just about justice, it's about redemption. Respect isn't demanded through wealth or status, it's earned through character. If this story of justice and redemption touched your heart, if it reminded you that consequences can lead to growth, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that humility beats entitlement every time. Subscribe for more incredible courtroom stories that restore your faith in justice. And tell me in the comments, do you think Karen truly learned her lesson? Thank you for watching, and remember, character is what you do when you think nobody's watching, but somebody always is.